Good afternoon, colleagues. We begin with our first item of business, which is portfolio questions. And the portfolio is finance. Question number 1, Ruth Maguire.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what recent engagement it's had with the Treasury.
Cabinet Secretary Kate Forbes.
I'm in regular communication with Treasury ministers, and my officials are also in close contact with Treasury officials. I wrote as recently as the 2nd of November to the Chancellor seeking greater clarity on COVID-19 funding consequentials, as well as flexibility regarding the job retention scheme.
Ruth Maguire.
Thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. I know the Cabinet Secretary has already welcomed the positive but long overdue announcement about the extension of the job retention scheme. However, there are still questions around the poor targeting of the self-employment income support scheme and the fact that it offers no relief for people who have become self-employed more recently. Can the Cabinet Secretary lay out the impact of this on the self-employed in Scotland, and will she continue to push the Chancellor to improve the scheme?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, Ruth Maguire raises an important point because due to the continued gap in eligibility for the UK-wide scheme, there is an increasing number of self-employed people who have had no support since the beginning of the pandemic. Now, the Scottish Government has tried to step in where we can, for example, with the newly self-employed grant, but I will continue to ask the Chancellor to review the requirements and the eligibility requirements to open up support to self-employed people who have so far been unfairly excluded.
Now, I should have indicated that question 1 and question 3 are grouped together, so we'll take question 3 and come back to question 2. Linda Fabiani.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government when it last spoke with the Office of the Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I am in regular contact with the Office of the Chancellor of the Exchequer, and I wrote most recently on the 2nd of November asking for an urgent meeting. Unfortunately, that urgent meeting didn't take place to discuss consequentials as well as the furlough scheme.
And
some supplementary... Sorry, Linda Fabiani.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Thank you, Cabinet Secretary. Cabinet Secretary, it's my view that our response to this pandemic needs to be long-term and it needs to be forward-thinking. I know that councils too, with their COVID recovery plans for local authorities right across the country, also feel this. I'm concerned, therefore, that the UK Government has reduced its spending review to one-year limits, which doesn't allow proper planning, either financially or otherwise in the longer term. And can I ask whether that is something that the intention is to discuss at the next meeting with the Chancellor?
Cabinet Secretary Kate Forbes.
Well, Linda Fabiani raises an important point because throughout the pandemic, our ability to respond quickly has been contingent on the flexibility as well as the clarity on funding. And looking ahead, yes, under current arrangements, we are very dependent on a funding settlement from the UK Government for next year's budget, which we are already starting to plan. And if the UK Government only indicates our funding for a year and doesn't even indicate it in a fulsome way through a budget, but through a spending review instead, then it is hard for us to plan beyond that point. The UK spending review later this month will only give us a very provisional and partial picture ahead of the fuller information in the delayed UK budget, which of course we still don't have a date for. So can I just be very clear that a UK spending review is not a UK budget, and so we'll have to set our budget in advance of knowing what UK tax and spending plans are for the coming year. And I think it's very clear to everybody, whether it's local government or people sitting in the chamber, that that makes it very difficult to plan financially for the longer term.
Thank you. So at this point, we'll take the supplementaries to questions 1 and 3. Murdo Fraser, to be followed by Tom Arthur.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Over the past few weeks, the Scottish Government have been given additional guarantees of £1.7 billion in spending from the Treasury, taking the total in the current financial year to £8.2 billion additional. Now, we all have constituents, both individuals and businesses, which are suffering from COVID-19 restrictions and are desperate for support. So can I ask the Finance Secretary, when will the Scottish Government set out to the Chamber how these new funds will be allocated?
Cabinet Secretary.
Thanks to Murdo Fraser for that question. And can I be completely clear that every penny of that additional funding, like all consequentials we receive from the UK government, will be spent in dealing with COVID, and a substantial amount is being spent supporting businesses. Murdo Fraser will already be aware of the initial £2.3 billion that was then exceeded in the autumn budget revision, exceeded again with the October restrictions, and will continually be exceeded by the ongoing financial support to businesses that are being impacted. Now, he will also know that the next point of clarifying and formally detailing how that money is spent will be the spring budget revision, but I have indicated to the Finance Committee that I'm keen to be flexible and to provide as much transparent information on how that money is being spent in advance of the spring budget revision.
Thank you. Tom Arthur, to be followed by Claire Baker. Tom Arthur.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I ask the Cabinet Secretary what discussions there has been with the UK Government specifically about the differentiated economic impact of COVID, both within and between the nations of the UK?
Cabinet Secretary.
That's an issue that regularly comes up at our Finance Minister's quadrilateral and came up again last month, and I've also detailed it in my letter to the Chancellor last week, because with the different impact, with the health advice advising different restrictions at different points, it's important that we have maximum financial flexibility so that the Scottish Government, and indeed the Welsh Government and the Northern Irish Executive, can tailor our COVID support to each of the nation's distinct needs. Now, to be fair to Treasury, that's one of the reasons why they have put in place a guarantee which slightly deviates from the normal means of providing consequentials, which would only be as and when announcements are made. So that has helped, but of course Tom Arthur will know that from the beginning I've asked for some temporary flexibilities on our financial settlements in order to tailor our response further.
Claire Baker.
Thank you. Can I ask the Cabinet Secretary for an update on discussions with the UK Government over the future of BIFAB, which is now at a critical stage? Commitments were given at last week's ministerial statement to a UK and Scottish Government working group, but time is now running out and there appears to be a lack of urgency.
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, as Claire Baker will know, it's my colleague Fiona Hislop that leads on the response to BIFAB. Those conversations I know and understand are ongoing with the UK Government, and there has been a willingness to work together when it comes to BIFAB. I know Fiona Hislop outlined in her statement, I believe it was last week, more of that information, and has committed to keeping Parliament regularly updated in light of the importance of BIFAB, not just to local members and to the workforce, but also to Scotland.
Thank you very much. Question number 2, Gillian Martin, who joins us remotely.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government how it will finance the green recovery.
Minister Ben McPherson.
The Scottish Government is committed to a green recovery from COVID-19, one which captures the potential opportunities of our transition to net zero and which, crucially, creates good green jobs in Scotland. And we are already investing significant sums in this, not least an additional £2 billion of capital spending for transformative net zero projects over the next Parliament, a multi-annual commitment to peatland restoration worth £250 million, and the £62 million Energy Transition Fund announced this summer. Our continued commitment to a green recovery will also be set out in the upcoming Climate Change Plan update and the 21-22 budget.
Gillian Martin.
Thank the Minister for that answer. Job losses in my area are a particular concern with many of my constituents working in oil and gas. And this week, the Scottish Tory leader said we should abandon climate change targets to protect oil and gas jobs. Does the Minister agree with me that this ill-informed and simplistic view ignores that the expertise of oil and gas workers is key to a transition into a more sustainable economy, and that in order to build the sectors of the future, that Scotland needs the borrowing powers to front-load recovery and create the right conditions for new jobs and a future for the workers of the North East?
Minister. I agree with Gillian Martin, and the Scottish Government, as I said, remains committed to being net zero by 2045 and achieving that in a just way. This is why we have committed to a Just Transition Fund, as I mentioned in my last answer, and we are building from the principles already embedded in our climate change legislation and the advice from the Independent Just Transition Commission's interim report. As you would expect, planning will be crucial to ensure that opportunities from the transition for the economy and society are not missed, and that risks associated with rapid structural change are mitigated. It is crucial that a sustainable, resilient future is developed for those in the oil and gas sector and its supply chain, whose skills and expertise will be vital for the transition. And as always, as the Cabinet Secretary mentioned in her answer just a few moments ago, we continue to press the UK Government for more financial flexibility, particularly around borrowing, to support our economy, especially in the context of the pandemic.
I've got potentially 4 supplementaries here. Maurice Golden to be followed by Neil Findlay.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I refer members to my register of interests. Since 2016, the SNP have spent millions of pounds promoting recycling, but Scotland's recycling rate is actually worse than it was then. A further £2.8 million has been thrown at SNP-run Glasgow City Council, with no improvement seen in the latest figures. In fact, 11 local authorities have recycling rates that are either stagnating or declining. Can the Minister explain why so little has been achieved despite spending so much?
Minister.
Our commitment towards recycling, of course, is embedding legislation, and that is in partnership with local government. Recycling is, of course, an important part of our collective commitment and focus on how we reduce our waste and to recycle in a way that is as carbon neutral as possible and utilises both innovation and consideration on how we reduce carbon in the chain of the recycling process and move towards greater upcycling within society as a whole. The work is ongoing. I think this is an aspect that I will consider that Maurice Golden has raised, and would be happy to write to him in more detail about these points. But I think to question the commitment of this government towards recycling is unfounded, and it is important that we collectively work together to boost recycling and encourage recycling in society and support local government in that endeavour.
And Neil Findlay to be followed by Liam MacArthur.
Green energy will be central to the recovery. So why is it that the profits, huge profits from wind energy projects are being exported to the boardrooms of multinational companies across Europe and venture capital firms when they could be kept in the community and they could be used for public services? What hard cash is available for community-owned wind farms and for publicly owned wind farms?
Minister.
Well, thank Neil Findlay for an important question, and he will be aware that the UK emissions trading scheme, the contract for difference, is reserved. So a lot of the aspects in which he has contextualised his question are questions for the UK government. I think what's important to reflect on in terms of the historic position of the UK as a whole was that we had a comparative advantage when it came to the development of wind energy technology several decades ago, and we lost that, and that's why that construction that he mentioned takes place in other European countries. Whereas in some other areas of innovation, for example, in the marine energy sector, particularly in tidal energy development at the moment, Scotland has several innovative companies who are developing technology and at the forefront of that development across the world. And what we need, and the UK government are currently reviewing the contract for difference, and that is welcome, what we need is the UK government to support the development of tidal energy and marine energy so that we can maintain that USP in the technologies that we do have a comparative advantage in, and make sure that some of the considerations that Mr Findlay has raised around wind do not replicate themselves in the technologies that are being developed now for the future.
And Liam MacArthur to be followed by Alec Rowley.
The Minister will know that reducing transport emissions is going to be key to Scotland meeting its climate change objectives. Does he therefore accept the need for the Government to help fund the replacement of the existing ferry fleet, including those serving the Lifeline internal routes in Orkney, with low-emission vessels? Will he commit to ensuring that this happens in keeping with the urgency of the climate emergency and the needs of island communities served by those ferries?
Minister. Excuse me, Presiding Officer, I didn't pick up all of that question given the quality of the line. However, I would emphasise that some of the points raised by Liam MacArthur are perhaps better directed towards Mr Wheelhouse, and I will give an undertaking to Mr MacArthur for myself or Mr Wheelhouse to write to him on the points raised.
Thank you, Minister. And Alec Rowley.
Don't question the government's commitment when it comes to renewables, but when it comes to the story of renewable jobs being created in Scotland, the government's story is one of failure. That's just a fact. Therefore, where are the jobs going to come from? What is the plan for jobs to build back a greener economy?
Minister. As I mentioned in my first response to Gillian Martin, of course, we have invested £100 million in the programme for government towards the Green Jobs Fund, in addition to the extensive package of skills and employment support already announced. As I also alluded to, we are investing significant other initiatives within the programme for government towards the mission for new, good green jobs. And we are aligning that to skills and employment to support green jobs, as you would expect, including the £60 million youth guarantee, providing increased opportunities for green apprenticeships across public sector bodies, which I'm sure is welcome. And of course, there is the £25 million National Transition Training Fund aimed at supporting up to 10,000 people facing redundancy and unemployment and sectors with the greatest potential for future growth, including a focus on the provision of green skills. So lots of investment, lots of work ongoing, more work to do, of course, but the significant potential for Scotland to lead in green energy and for the return on green jobs and investment from that is significant, and we should all get behind the national efforts to realise that potential.
Question 4, David Torrance.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what further funding it will allocate to support regeneration of high streets and encourage footfall in the light of the rise of online shopping due to COVID-19.
Minister Ben McPherson.
An important question from David Torrance, and we have established a collaborative town centre review to develop a new vision for our towns, taking COVID-19 into account and establishing a means to achieve this. The review, which is due to report in December, will help us decide what further support might be needed for town centres. We have already provided £22 million since March for towns, and we have launched our Scotland Loves Local campaign to encourage people to safely support their local businesses, shopping locally and accessing local online offerings. And I know David Torrance has been actively supporting this campaign in his constituency, along with many other MSPs across the country.
David Torrance.
I thank the Minister for that answer. A number of high streets across the country have undergone dramatic changes over recent years due to a shift in our buying habits. In my constituency, Kirkcaldy Town Centre has been greatly impacted by the increase in online and retail park shopping, and is currently facing many challenges, including a significant number of empty buildings. Can I ask the Minister how we can encourage owners of vacant properties to turn them into affordable social housing and promote town centre living, which has been shown to be a key factor in helping regenerate high streets by increasing footfall and creating a sense of community ownership?
Minister.
The Town Centre Review will consider all issues for town centres, including affordable social housing and the ownership of vacant properties, and considerations around that when it comes to planning law. And I know Mr Stewart is very interested in that aspect, as you would expect. Many local authorities are already promoting town centre living, and it is a key theme of our Town Centre Action Plan. We are supporting this further through our Town Centre Fund and Regeneration Capital Grant Fund, with local authorities repurposing vacant and derelict properties for affordable housing. So there is potential for significant change in this regard. I think David Torrance asked an important question. If he would like to follow up with myself and Mr Stewart as the review is published, and in due course we'd welcome that correspondence.
Thank you. Question number 5, Claudia Beamish, who joins us remotely.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what measures it plans to take to meet any budget shortfall that local authorities are facing going into winter.
Cabinet Secretary Kate Forbes.
Well, I do recognise the pressures on local government who have in many ways been on the front line of our response to COVID, whether that's through business grants or welfare support. we have committed £382.2 million in additional COVID-related funding to local authorities, and I also announced a package of financial flexibilities that was developed with COSLA on the 8th of October for Scotland's councils, which could be worth up to £600 million over the next 2 years. We are currently working with COSLA to finalising a lost income scheme, which would be worth an estimated £90 million. And taken together, those measures bring the value of the overall support package for councils up to £1 billion. The financial settlement for this year had already provided an increase in day-to-day spending, but clearly with these additional pressures, this additional funding will go some way at least to supporting local authorities.
Claudia Beamish.
I thank the Presiding Officer. I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that detailed answer. However, local authorities have little resilience after 10 years of cuts, despite all the different funds that the Cabinet Secretary has highlighted. And SPICE has estimated that funding to local authorities fell by 7% in real terms between 2013 and 2020. Additional support for local authorities in the form of permission to delay payments on borrowing and short-term borrowing gives immediate respite, but only pushes the problem down the line. Without more funding, how can councils prevent cuts to vital services? So will the Scottish Government respond to Unison's call to plug the gap and look at this again? Thank you.
Cabinet Secretary Kate Forbes.
Well, rather than disputing whether or not local government funds have been cut, and I would put that in the context of the overall cuts to the Scottish Government's budget under a decade of Tory austerity, the point I would make right now is that as we look ahead, we need to ensure that we're working closely in partnership with local authorities to respond to COVID. I said at the outset that they have in many ways been on the front line of the response. I think their response has been exemplary. We work very closely with COSLA to understand the financial impact on local government, and will continue to do that in advance of next year's budget. But of course, when it comes to next year's budget, it's worth bearing in mind that we will be setting a Scottish budget with partial provisional estimates from the UK government in advance of their own budget, and it will be an extremely difficult budget to set. I want to ensure that we support local authorities, protect their budgets, but to do that, I need maximum clarity and support in our own budget from the UK government.
Thank you. Question number 6, Edward Mountain.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government how the additional £700 million of funding from the UK Government for the current financial year will be spent.
Cabinet Secretary Kate Forbes.
Well, every penny of the additional £700 million, and indeed every penny of any additional consequentials that we receive from the UK Government, will be and has been spent in dealing with COVID. A significant amount has been spent directly supporting businesses in light of the economic impact, as well as, of course, ensuring that the health service can respond to COVID. Over £2.3 billion has thus far been spent in supporting business. The most recent autumn budget revision provided a further £190 million in business support, including employment and training support. Since then, we've gone further in providing initially over £40 million for businesses directly affected by the second wave of the pandemic, but that number continues to rise on a weekly basis as business grants are paid out in light of the current strategic framework.
Edward Mountain.
And I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. Given the now increased amount of unallocated money that the Scottish Government now holds, will the Cabinet Secretary consider increasing the funding for care-at-home providers to allow carers to spend more time with those they care for in their home environment as a result of COVID-19?
Cabinet Secretary.
Thank the member for that question, and it is worth just clarifying that there is a difference between the formal allocation process in the autumn budget revision, which he's alluding to, and the fact that every penny that we receive is going towards budget pressures that we know of. And he quite rightly talks about the pressures on health and social care. And so it's important that that funding is available. And of course, the most recent guarantee is likely to need to last for the next 5 months into the end of the financial year. And we will ensure that funding that needs to go on health and social care is paid to health and social care. He'll know that in the most recent autumn budget revision, there was another £1.8 billion to the health and social care budget, and that brings total health and social care spending on COVID-19 to over £2.4 billion. But the last point I'd make is that clearly COVID-19 is first and foremost a health crisis. So we will continue to prioritise health funding through the remainder of this financial year and beyond.
Stuart McMillan, to be followed by Willie Rennie.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. Generally, it is welcome news of the guarantee of the further consequential payments, but as we're all aware also, the Chancellor has been clear that support for businesses in England will be open-ended, yet the same assurances have not been provided for businesses in Scotland. Can the Cabinet Secretary advise whether the Scottish Government has received further clarification as to how funding will be provided for demand-led business support in Scotland, and where demand is greater than the Barnett share?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, Stuart McMillan touches on a particular concern we have with the way that our budgets are set, which is, of course, that I am obliged by law to balance the budget. But when there's a requirement to fund demand-led schemes like the business support schemes, which involve an unquantifiable number of businesses for an indefinite period of time, there are some challenges there. Now, the UK Government has made moves to provide the guarantee that I previously alluded to, but we do need to hear a reassurance that businesses in Scotland will receive the support they need, even if that support exceeds the guarantee that's been provided to date. So if the demand is greater than the funding provided, we need that reassurance that it will be funded. Now, no such funding assurance has been provided as yet, but I continue to press the case and continue to try and work very constructively with the UK Government in order to ensure that we can proactively manage our response to the pandemic, whether that's the economic challenges or the health issues.
Willie Rennie.
It's on that subject. The Finance Secretary has referred to the guarantee, but also it seems that she is mirroring what the UK Government is doing in terms of grant support. I've come across lots of businesses who are missing out from financial support when they really need it. What flexibility does she think she can get through this system, and can she get that flexibility from the UK Government to do this?
Kate Forbes.
Well, I think Willie Rennie's point touches on a particular challenge facing us right now, which is that in light of the need for me to balance my budget and to ensure I can't overspend, there's a requirement on us to use the funding that we have to make that go as far as possible. But I also need to be prudent in understanding that I can't overspend. And therefore, the funding that we've provided to date, it has tried to push that spending envelope as far as possible, which is why, going back a few months, we provided the Pivotal Resilience Fund, which was the only one of its kind in the UK, and also the Hardship Scheme, again, the only one of its kind in the UK. Most recently, we announced additional funding, for example, for the for nightclubs, as well as for the soft play sector. And I'm very keen that where we can provide additional funding over and above what the UK Government is providing, we will do that. But right now, with my hands tied as a result of the need to balance my budget, I will use the funding that's being provided, make it go as far as possible, but the grants that we've provided on a recurring basis as part of the strategic framework are in line with the grants that are being provided by the UK Government in England.
Thank you. Question 7, Alistair Allen.
To ask the Scottish Government what discussions it has had with the UK Government regarding the furlough scheme.
Cabinet Secretary Kate Forbes.
Well, Scottish ministers and officials have had numerous discussions, perhaps too many to count, with their UK counterparts about the furlough scheme. There have been 8 different versions of the furlough scheme announced by the Chancellor. 3 of them haven't been implemented. All of that happening whilst employers struggle to keep track and make business decisions. So we welcome the Chancellor's long overdue announcement at the 11th hour that the job retention scheme would be extended until March 2021. We've repeatedly urged the UK Government to make that support available for as long as it's needed. And whilst the extension will help prevent job losses, clearly it's come too late for many businesses and workers in each of our constituencies.
Alistair Allen.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that response. The Chancellor's recent announcement that the furlough scheme will be extended is welcome. However, months of unnecessary confusion caused by the UK Government have, I know, meant that some employers have already taken the difficult decision to make people redundant because they expected the scheme to be withdrawn. The UK government had fair warning that this would happen, and indeed the SNP have been calling for an extension for months. Does the Cabinet Secretary believe that Scotland's businesses deserve better than the UK government's confused approach?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, that confused approach caused unnecessary confusion and hardship for employers, workers across Scotland at a time of extreme challenge and difficulty. And as Alistair Allen says, we have been calling for an extension for months. And it took England going into lockdown for the Chancellor to change his tune and extend it for a month. And it took some sort of bizarre exchange in the last week within the Scottish Conservatives to see him extend it to March. So since the job retention scheme was announced in March, we repeatedly called on the UK government to ensure that it would continue for as long as businesses and workers needed it. The delay has clearly cost many people their jobs, and some of those job losses may have been prevented, highly likely to have been prevented, if the Chancellor had taken the decision to extend the furlough scheme earlier in the year. So there are some pertinent questions, I think, as to why the Chancellor changed his mind and why he didn't value Scottish and indeed Welsh businesses as much as he valued English businesses.
And apologies to Michelle Ballantyne, but I'm afraid we're going to have to move on to the next portfolio, which is Environment, Climate Change and Land Reform. Question number 1, Claire Baker.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government how it is meeting its duty under the Marine Scotland Act 2010 to ensure the protection and enhancement of the health of the Scottish marine area.
Minister Marie Goujon.
Scotland's National Marine Plan, which was adopted in 2015, sets out the framework for sustainable development and use of our marine area in order to protect and enhance the marine environment while promoting both existing and emerging industries. The Marine Protected Area Network now covers 34% of our seas, and work continues to complete further site designations, implement required management measures and deliver a monitoring programme. And finally, we have a robust process in place for licensable marine activities to ensure that their environmental impacts are managed and minimised.
Claire Baker.
Thank you. A leaked unpublished government report called Scottish Overall Assessment 2020 provides a bleak scientific assessment concluding that marine habitats in 5 regions have shrunk in the past 9 years. Why is the government yet to announce the classification of marine SPAs to protect our seabirds as required under EU law, despite the first draft publication being in 2014 and the final advice received to classify the sites in 2018? This would be a clear opportunity for government to demonstrate its commitment to reversing biodiversity loss, maintaining EU standards and ultimately giving seabirds and their habitats a brighter future by classifying these important sites.
Minister.
I just want to assure the member that work on designating the MPA and SPA sites is ongoing. We had completed the consultation towards that. But I also hope that the member and other members across the chamber can understand that because of COVID-19 and the way that I think, well, all areas of government have had to respond to that, that work had been delayed. But again, I would assure Claire Baker that we are continuing with this work, as well as a whole host of other measures that we have underway.
Kenneth Gibson, to be followed by Finlay Carson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Does the Minister agree that there is a need for greater protection of our coastal waters, as advocated by the campaign group Our Seas and the community of Arran Seabed Trust? And what steps will be taken over the next 18 months to enhance that protection?
Minister.
I agree with Kenny Gibson and absolutely recognise the need to protect our coastal waters. And that's been set out in the Marine Scotland Act 2010 and in Scotland's National Marine Plan. But as I've already said in my response to Claire Baker, the Scotland's MPA network exceeds the anticipated targets that are there at the moment, which require 30% sea coverage from the Convention on Biological Diversity. And over the next 18 months, we're taking forward fisheries management measures for a number of inshore MPAs and for 11 priority marine features too outside of MPAs. And again, as I'd said in my response to Claire Baker's supplementary, as well as the work that is ongoing to complete the network of Scottish MPAs. And again, I would hope that the member would understand why that work couldn't have been progressed as we would have liked because we've all had to deal with the COVID-19 crisis this year. But we really want to continue that work as soon as possible. But of course, the timeline will depend on how soon we can resume stakeholder consultations in light of COVID-19.
And Finlay Carson.
Given the aforesaid unacceptable leak of unpublished confidential reports from Nature Scot relating to the health of Scottish marine environment and the consequential loss of confidence among our fishing communities, how does the Minister plan to rebuild trust and confidence in Marine Scotland and Nature Scotland, particularly as we welcome back and look forward to the rollout of vessel monitoring systems and the need for collaboration for data collection?
Minister Mary Goujon.
I would say to Finlay Carson that we obviously work closely with all of our stakeholders, and we will be publishing the marine assessment over the coming months. And those relationships are obviously very important to us, and especially given all the work that I've outlined today that we're currently undertaking when that comes to the designations of MPAs, SPAs. There are so many interests involved in each of these designations and in all of the work that we do. So of course, the relationships that we have with each of those stakeholders is vital to that and vital to us and enabling us to able to continue that work.
Question number 2, Richard Lyle.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what power SEPA has with regard to Scotland's sewerage system.
Cabinet Secretary Rosanna Cunningham.
SEPA has powers to set conditions in the licences it issues to Scottish Water in order to protect the water environment from sewage discharges. SEPA can also take enforcement action for breaches of licence conditions.
Richard Lyle.
Can I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer? Over the last few months, a constituent has had human effluent waste running down his driveway from houses next door that surprisingly don't seem to be connected to the sewerage system. Scottish Water and the local council have failed to resolve the problem, as they say it's a private matter. Scottish Water suggests that SEPA does not have the power to regulate in this matter. If not, why not? Is it not an environmental situation?
Cabinet Secretary.
Obviously, there's some history to that situation that I can't be aware of, and I'm happy if Richard Lyle wants to bring the detail to me. SEPA's powers for dealing with discharges of sewage are only triggered if there is an associated impact on the water environment. This means that SEPA does not have powers to address nuisance issues arising from sewage discharges to land unless it actually reaches a watercourse. The local authority is responsible for dealing with sewage pollution to land. I am aware of a recent issue at Bothwell Road where a private pipe was damaged, and I understand this has now been repaired. But as I previously indicated, there's obviously some historic issues here, and I would be happy to engage with Richard Lyle further on this.
Thank you. A supplementary from Mark Roskell.
Heavy rainfall in August led to beaches up and down the Forth Coast breaching safe water quality levels as sewage systems overflowed, including in both Kinghorn and Aberdour. And given that climate change is going to lead to more frequent occurrences of heavy rainfall events, what plans does the Scottish Government have to prioritise Scottish Water's investment in the sewage systems in coastal towns to increase capacity and to stop these routine overflows of sewage coming out onto our beaches?
Cabinet Secretary.
The reality of sewage overflows onto beaches is one that we have had to deal with over quite a long period of time, and I think it's a reality that comes with a particular level of rainfall. The member is quite right, however, to flag the increasing incidence of this and the potential for that to become even more of an issue in the future. These are issues that we look at very carefully in respect of the adaptation investment that's required for the future in terms of managing climate change. And he may be aware that there is now extra money which is being put in for coastal defences and coastal work, as well as the flooding work which SEPA does, as well as looking to the infrastructure that Scottish Water may be involved in. These can be complex. I know that a number of members have very specific issues in a number of their areas in respect particularly of bathing waters. The way of assessing bathing waters looks over, I believe, a 5-year period, so sometimes it can look a little bit out of sync with what the reality is. But I'd be happy to engage with Mark Ruskell further on the very specific issue that he's raising about the areas within his own area of interest.
And question 3, James Dornan.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what support is available to communities to support a green recovery from COVID-19.
Cabinet Secretary.
We are committed to delivering a green recovery from COVID-19, which captures the possibilities of a just transition to net zero, including by creating good green jobs. Action in this regard is at the heart of our recent programme for government, and communities will have a prominent role to play in its delivery. We recently launched a £3.5 million Community Climate Asset Fund and a £2 million Islands Green Recovery Programme, both specifically aimed at supporting communities to play their part. Our town centre funds, including our £18 million Town Centre Capital Fund and £1 million Scotland Loves Local Fund, aim to promote, improve and green local places while supporting local economies and our 20-minute neighbourhood ambition.
James Dornan.
Thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. It's clear that communities across Scotland have risen to the challenge of COVID, looking after one another while having to stay apart. The Cabinet Secretary says it will be central to a green recovery, but can she outline what lessons can be learned from her experiences during COVID restrictions and how this can contribute to a greener, fairer future for Scotland's communities?
Cabinet Secretary.
COVID-19 has affected us all, and my thoughts especially are with those who've lost loved ones to the virus. It is the case that we can perceive that there are likely to be some very serious longer-term lessons that can be learnt from what has happened. The way we live, work and travel necessarily changed as we stayed at home to protect ourselves and each other, and it's important that as we recover from this experience we learn those lessons. Our Social Renewal Advisory Board is looking very closely at just that, how we support communities through the pandemic, how, when possible, we return to a more normal way of life, and what needs to change to help us build that fairer, more equal Scotland.
Thank you. And question 4, Alexander Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what its position is on the impact on Scotland of the UK Government's investment in the measurements to tackle climate change.
Cabinet Secretary.
The upcoming Net Zero review and Net Zero strategy will be crucial in clarifying the level of ambition from the UK Government. We continue to press the UK Government to take urgent action in a number of reserved areas, including decarbonising the gas grid, particularly as Scotland's target of net zero by 2045 is 5 years ahead of the UK, with the success of both governments in reaching their respective targets so intrinsically linked. We also urge the UK Government to work with us on the joint UK emissions trading scheme to maintain carbon pricing after EU exit, rather than implement a reserved carbon tax that will remove Scottish ministers' accountability for a key mechanism to decarbonise 28% of Scotland's emissions.
Alexander Stewart.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that response. Within the last fortnight, the UK Government has allocated £500,000 to develop electric vehicle batteries in Thurso and an extra £9 million to support dozens of green initiatives across Scotland. The investment in cutting-edge Scottish projects will help us reach our net zero by 2045. So will the Cabinet Secretary join with me in welcoming the investment, and does the Cabinet Secretary agree that climate change will be best tackled by governments working together across the UK and the rest of the world for a better future?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I think, as I indicated in my earlier answer, a great deal of work is being done, including on, for example, that emissions trading scheme, but the working together can be stymied by an indecision on the part of the UK Government, which has reserved over this entire period of time a fallback option of a carbon tax, which they refused to rule out, and is now jeopardising our ability to introduce that scheme on January the 1st, when it is actually needed. Look, money from anywhere is going to be useful in fighting climate change, but I need to advise the member that we need UK Government action in a number of different sectors. I've raised UK ETS. The Net Zero review is Treasury-led, a completely separate thing. Carbon capture and storage, low-carbon hydrogen, green hydrogen, contract for difference, Ofgem, decarbonisation of energy networks, biomass, heat in buildings, hydrogen, transport. These are all areas in which we need the UK Government to be moving faster than it already is. And I hope the member is going to join with me in encouraging his counterparts south of the border to actually deal with us as equals instead of what's happening at the moment.
Thank you. Question 5, Fulton McGregor.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what action it is taking to reduce harmful emissions in densely populated urban areas.
Cabinet Secretary.
Following an independent review, a consultation on a draft new air quality strategy for Scotland was published on 30th of October. The new strategy sets out a series of actions for government, Transport Scotland, local authorities and others to further reduce air pollution across Scotland. A number of the proposed actions relating to transport and domestic burning have particular relevance for densely populated areas. Our commitment to introduce low emission zones into Scotland's 4 biggest cities remains a key initiative for further improving urban air quality and protecting public health.
Fulton McGregor.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that response. Can she outline some of the details in the Cleaner Air for Scotland strategy that will contribute to the reduction in emissions in urban areas, and how the Scottish Government is seeking to engage with the public on the plans and encourage as many people as possible to respond to the consultation?
Cabinet Secretary.
As I've just highlighted, there are a number of specific actions which are of particular relevance for urban areas, including proposals to control the supply of the most polluting domestic fuels, which will help to improve air quality in our cities and towns. In addition, many of the transport actions will also deliver important benefits in urban areas. For example, we will work to deliver our active travel vision of enabling walking, cycling and wheeling to be the most popular modes of travel for short everyday journeys by 2030. We have been raising awareness of the consultation via stakeholder engagement and through an ongoing social media campaign, but I would certainly encourage everyone, and that includes all my colleagues in the chamber, right across the chamber, anyone with an interest to provide their views as part of this consultation, particularly those who will be impacted by the proposals. And I would gently suggest that this is a very good thing for people to take back to their constituencies and use as a potential hook for the various columns and things that I know that are always and can always be a strain in thinking about what to write about next. Here's an ideal opportunity for everybody.
Thank you, Cabinet Secretary. Question 6, Stuart McMillan.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what action it is taking in partnership with local authorities, landowners and tourism operators to prevent illegal dumping of waste in lay-bys.
Minister Mary Gougeon.
Fly tipping is illegal, it's dangerous and it's just completely unnecessary. And while this is primarily an issue for local authorities, we've supported the establishment of waste facilities in rural areas through our £9 million Rural Tourism Infrastructure Fund, and we're committed to working with partners at a national level to examine how we might make the best collective use of public resource to tackle waste management issues.
Stuart McMillan.
I thank the Minister for that reply, and the Minister will be aware that tourism is everyone's business, and would you consider introducing a multi-agency public awareness campaign to make people aware of the dangers of dumping their chemical waste at lay-bys, as well as wild campers dumping their waste wherever they are? And would the Minister also agree with me that any public awareness campaign must have landowner representation to give it the best chance of success?
Minister Mary Gougeon.
I thank the member for that point. I mean, I'm sure Stuart McMillan will be aware that there was a national summit that was held about this by the Cabinet Secretary for the Rural Economy earlier in September. And that tasked a multi-agency group to look at the difficulties that have been caused by irresponsible visitors. And that group includes National Park Authorities, Scottish Natural Heritage, Nature Visit Scotland, Forestry and Land Scotland, and others. And they're actually due to the Ports Ministers this month, with hopefully a series of recommendations on how the public sector might collectively manage visitors to the countryside, because I'm sure, as all colleagues will know, this is something that affects, that we need all these bodies to buy into, and we need them to all collaborate and work with us if we hope to tackle this effectively. And as part of the work that National Summit and the multi-agency group are looking at is really focused on how they can educate and inform visitors and businesses and involve all necessary stakeholders, including private landowners. And just to go back to the member's first point about public awareness campaigns, now we've developed waste marketing campaigns along with Zero Waste Scotland, COSLA and local authorities, on how to manage waste responsibly, and that included messages on littering, fly tipping, and that's as well as a campaign with Zero Waste Scotland and Keep Scotland Beautiful regarding littering, which was launched in the summer. We really need and want to get the message across that this just isn't acceptable. We live in a beautiful country. People should be responsible. Quite simply, put their litter in a bin or take it home and dispose of their waste responsibly.
Liz Smith.
Thank you. Could I ask the Minister just on that point, whether in the discussions that she's having with local authorities that any thought has been given to legislative changes which would allow the local authorities to have powers to pursue the prosecution of fly tippers by means other than a report to the Procurator Fiscal?
Minister Mary Gougeon.
I believe that may be work that's being taken forward as part of the review into the litter strategy, where that was looking at enforcement and penalties. But I'd be happy to get back to the member with more information on that.
Thank you. And question number 7, Pauline McNeill.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what urgent action is taking to protect the eggs of the critically endangered flapper skate, which have recently been found off the north-west coast of Scotland.
Minister Mary Gougeon.
Well, firstly, I want to say that we welcome the discovery of flapper skate eggs in the Inner Sound, which provides further evidence of our rich and outstanding biodiversity. Marine Scotland has received initial advice from Nature Scot regarding that particular location, and they're now working together to consider the available evidence and including looking at the potential threats from all human activities in order to determine the most appropriate action that we can take. And I expect to receive advice on this matter imminently, and that of course takes account of the urgency associated with this when we're determining our next steps.
Pauline McNeill.
The Minister will obviously be aware that flapper skate is an ultra-rare endangered species, and I found out today that more endangered than the giant panda, so I learned something today. Nature Scot and the Scottish Association for Marine Science, as you said, they nurtured a flapper skate egg from the first time from laying to hatching, which allowed scientists to confirm accurately the gestation period. But given that the Marine Protected Area Network currently fails to achieve ecological coherence and there's only one designated area for critically endangered flapper skate, is the Minister really saying that it's a matter of time before there'll be a second site in order to protect this endangered species? Is that where the Government are heading?
Minister.
Firstly, I just want to respond to Pauline McNeill by saying that she's absolutely right about how important the discovery of this species is and how important it is. It's on the OSPAR list for being threatened or declining, and it's listed as critically endangered on the IUCN Red List. So this discovery is vitally important, but again, that's where I would want to reassure her. We are treating this as a matter of urgency, but we really have to take, there are quite a few things that we have to take into consideration as part of that. And again, as I illustrated in my first response, that includes taking into account all human activities and looking at the best way that we can protect the site that's been found. So I will, of course, continue to keep Parliament updated as that work progresses.
Thank you very much, and apologies to Richard Lyle and to Claire Adamson, but I'm afraid we've run out of time. We'll have to move on to the next item of business. There'll just be a short pause before we do exactly that.